and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. In this video, we're going to talk about Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So this is my third video about Harry Potter. I did a whole introduction where I talk about JK Rowling and a whole bunch of other issues, and then I covered the first book. The only thing I'll say about that is if you don't own them, buy them used. Do not support JK Rowling and her bigotry because she's still ranting and raving about it. So this book, unlike the first book, does not have multiple titles. Neither does anybody else, at least not in English, as far as I know. So this book was published in 1990. Looks like it was published in 98 in Britain and 99 in the U.S. So this is the second installment, and probably my least favorite of the first four of this book series. So big things about this is basically Harry's back at the Dursleys. They realize essentially he gets in trouble for, he doesn't use magic. They're not supposed to use magic, particularly in front of muggles, and because they're still in school. So the character that you introduce to first thing is a house elf by the name of Dobby. Dobby belongs to the Malfoys, and for some reason he likes Harry Potter, and he does not want them killing him, which is what the Malfoys intend to do in this book. So he comes around to try to do anything and everything to prevent Harry Potter from going back to Hogwarts, because of course he works for the Malfoys, who pure blood family. They do not like Harry Potter because they were in line with Voldemort, and Harry Potter somehow as a baby weakened him, and therefore their lives got screwed up. So Harry is not supposed to practice magic. Why not at school? So Dobby does in the Dursleys' house. So basically he gets a letter which alerts to the Dursleys that he cannot practice magic. And prior to that, they thought he could, so they were allowing him to exist. When they find out he can't, they lock him in a bedroom and bar the windows, and are intent on not allowing him to go back to school. So they're essentially putting him under house arrest. What ends up happening is his friend Ron can't get in touch with him, and Ron gets worried. So he enlists his brothers, and they steal the car their father enchanted to fly. Yeah. You get a little bit introduction to the craziness of Arthur Weasley, and how, despite the fact that he works for the misuse of magical objects, specifically preventing wizards from enchanting muggle or regular non-magical human objects, he does it himself. And essentially the boys steal the car and come and realize Harry's locked up, and they help rescue him. And then they get in trouble with Vard. You also get the introduction of Molly Weasley, you kind of hear a little bit in the first book, but you really get introduced to Arthur and Molly Weasley in this first part of this first book, where you have the absent-minded, slightly crazy husband and his very put-upon wife, who's also the mother of 8 children. 7 boys. I believe it's 7 boys. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, 7 boys, 1 girl. You also get to get to know a little bit about Ron's little sister Ginny in this book, because she's now 11, so she's going off to Hogwarts this year, and she becomes an important character specifically in this book, and then further on in the book series. So this is her first. You kind of see her in the very beginning of the first book, but you get to know Ginny a little bit more in this book, the awkward little 11-year-old. So Harry's rescued. He's at the Weasleys. Apparently the wizarding world knows Harry's at the Weasleys. They probably would have rescued him anyway. But Dobby is still involved here. So they've gotten their books and everything. They're trying to get to the train, and Ron and Harry are, because of Dobby, blocked from getting to the train. So they borrow the car again to get to school, and it crashes into a giant tree called the Weeping Willow. More on that book in the third book. There's a giant tree that moves around. for reasons. Again, third book. They get to school. They get in a lot of trouble. They get, like, if you screw up again, you're going to be in a heck of a lot of trouble, kind of thing, and you might be expelled. So they try to behave throughout this year. But then people start getting petrified. Essentially, they're being frozen. And nobody, basically, the last time this happened was in Hagrid's third year, and he was basically expelled for it because he was, he has an obsession with monsters, and he was dealing with a giant spider. And they thought the giant spider was doing it. It wasn't. And so it wasn't Hagrid. The other person who was in school at the time was a very stuck-up orphan boy who was very much beloved by everybody and very held in suspicion by Dumbledore, by the name of Tom Riddle, who is Voldemort as a boy. So what's going on, and you find this out, is at one point in time, Harry finds this diary, and he starts writing it, and it starts responding. And then it's stolen back. And basically him, Hermione, Ron, and Harry are trying to figure out what's doing this, because Harry actually keeps hearing things in the walls. He's hearing voices in the walls. And turns out he can speak to snakes because of Parseltongue. So, and that's partially connected to Voldemort. So Hagrid, of course, is blamed again. And turns out, no, it wasn't Hagrid. He's sent to the wizarding prison. So Ron, Hermione, and Harry are desperate to try to figure out what the heck's going on because they know it's not Hagrid. And they find this out because Ron and Harry end up interacting with the spider and nearly dying and being rescued by the car. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So the other person that's introduced to, he's not a major character. It's their Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, which is Gilderoy Lockhart. Lockhart's an idiot. He's a very good-looking idiot, but he's very much of a caricature of people who pretend to know things but don't, and actually steal stuff from other people, which is essentially what Lockhart did. He knows nothing and is just an idiot in a smiling face, and he wiped the memories of various people who did actually wonderful things, and he wrote books pretending he did them, and he didn't because he's an idiot. But Hermione, before being petrified, figures kind of what out. She writes a note on a piece of paper, figuring out, which says pipes. And Harry and Ron figure out it's a snake. And they also figure out where it is. Now, there's a girl's bathroom that is rarely used because there's a ghost in there by the name of Moaning Myrtle. And Moaning Myrtle is depressed because she was killed by the snake, which essentially the reason people are getting petrified is they're looking in mirrors and they're looking at reflections, so they're not dying. So that's where basically the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is. It's in that girl's bathroom. The other thing that happens that people don't notice, and I only notice by paying attention and other YouTube people's pointing it out, and you look at back the book, is this is the book where Rowling actually sets the timeline. Because one of the things that happens is each house has a ghost. And the ghost of the Harry's house is nearly headless Nick. And he has a death day party in this book. And on the cake, which basically it's a day celebrating the day he died, it gives the date. And they know it's like 100 or some years after it. So yeah, it dates the book. So the official timeline is the book series would end in 1998. So that's the other tad bit that you find in this book if you're paying attention to it. It dates them. It tells you when these events actually happened. But, so, back to the story. Harry and Ron, along with Lockhart, find the Chamber of Secrets. Jenny's been taken down there. She's the one who actually had the diary. She's the one who's released the snake, so to speak. And through basically being manipulated, she was possessed by Voldemort's childhood spirit. So they end up going down this whole there's a cave-in. Lockhart tries to wipe their memories, it backfires on him because he's trying to use Ron's wand, which has been broken, so it backfires on him. Harry has to go on alone. He finds Ginny. He fights off the snake with a sword he gets from the sorting hat that had belonged to Godric Gryffindor, who was the creator of his house. That's brought to him by Dumbledore's Phoenix, which is another character, sort of semi-character, similar to Harry's owl Hedwig, who's brought into the story. And Hedwig comes to him because I believe at this point Dumbledore is kicked out of the school by the school board, including Draco's father. So the school is actually about to be closed. Harry basically fights evil, is nearly killed, but Phoenix tears heal him. And then he basically uses a fang of the snake and stabs it into the diary, destroying it. So again, saves the day, similar to the first book. And that's kind of how it ends. They're brought back. Dumbledore's brought back. Jenny's healed. Her parents are happy to see her again. And it kind of ends on a kind of happy note. Everybody's brought back to normal because Mandrake Root, this is where the mandrakes are brought in. I have a sign on the back of my car. This is an actual plant. So JK Rowling doesn't have a copyright on an actual thing. In real life, the root does kind of look like a screaming baby. In the books, apparently they grow into teenagers and their voice will kill you, and they chop them up for potions. That wasn't thought out well. But eventually people are brought back. They're no longer petrified. Lockhart's wiped his memory is kind of crazy. So he's sent off to St. Mungo's, which is their hospital. And essentially Dumbledore is back in charge. The only other interesting thing that's kind of important that happens has to do with Dobby. Now, Harry knows that in order to free a house elf, all his owners had to do is give him clothing. So Ginny had been hiding, I think, the diary in an old sock. So what Harry does is he puts the old sock in the diary, and Dumbledore has actually given the diary back to Malfoy because that's how Ginny gets it. Malfoy, they run into each other in Diagon Alley, and Malfoy sticks it into one of Ginny's old school books, and that's how she gets it because Malfoys would have owned it because they were Voldemort people. And of course, there's no proof. So Harry gives the diary back. I think Dumbledore knows what's going on and kind of implies to Harry what he needs to do to free Dobby. So he gives the diary back to Malfoy. Malfoy, this is Lucius, Draco's father, sees the sock and throws it, and Dobby catches it. And therefore Dobby is free. And Malfoy is pissed because basically he's lost his servant and Dobby is a free elf. And he can protect Harry. And that's important because Dobby shows up again multiple times in the books and has a whole nother theme to him in there. But that's how this story ends. Again, they go back on. Everything's healed. Everything's normal. Voldemort's spirit is gone. The stranger is closed. The snake is dead. And everything is good again. Harry goes back to the Dursleys. And now at least the Dursleys know that he has friends and people who will kind of protect him, so they're not going to lock him up again. So I don't know if I can't remember exactly how it ends, but the Dursleys don't lock him up again. They're not that crazy. So that's how this book ends. Again, it's early on. It sets up a few more nuggets of what things go on. I'm not sure of this. I don't know the history, whether or not she had a full idea of the details of her story quite yet in place, because she was still, I think this book was written on a grant. So these things hadn't blown up yet when this book was written. So I'm pretty sure she didn't know if she was going to be able to complete the entire series. So this book and the second one very much work almost as, I wouldn't say standalone, but they do end on happy notes. So this is a good book. Not my favorite. I don't like how they get to school because I like the train stuff. But again, not my favorite. And there's some issue with the basilisk because it's varied in history whether or not it's a chicken-headed thing or a snake. But again, it's a good book for what it is. Again, it's fun. It's a good read. It's a good second installment to this series. But again, it's very much an open and shut story, similar to the first book. Harry goes to school, lots of antics, there's a mystery, they solve it, they defeat evil, it ends, everybody goes back home. So that's kind of the way this story ends. It starts to get more complicated into the third and fourth. Obviously, the fourth book is a cliffhanger. And obviously the rest of them, things get darker. But that is the second book. It's still very fun. There's still Quidditch going on. It's still very much a mystery because they're 12. But it does have that nugget of whether Rowling was intentional in this or not on dating the books. So that is it for this review. I will cover the rest of the Harry Potter books and the films. And I have a whole bunch of other reviews. I do homeschooling stuff as well. If you want to check out my channel, like and subscribe. But that is it. Thank you.